I'm going to be at Unreal Fest in Chicago from June 16th to June 18th, so if you're a creator and you're in the area, come and say hi, won't you? Over millennia, philosophers have asked some pretty serious questions. What is the meaning of life? Why do I smell like this? And more importantly, why is the third season of every Fortnite chapter so controversial? If you're at all familiar with Fortnite season discourse online, you've probably heard this one before. The Season 3 Curse. The basic concept is that, since Fortnite began doing yearly chapters in 2022, every third season has been doomed to be terrible or otherwise controversial in some way. I've decided to finally sit down and think more into something I've been pondering for a little while. Is the Season 3 curse real? Is the middle season of each annual chapter doomed to be middling at best? Or are people just connecting dots and seeking out the worst parts of these seasons, just to fit the narrative? And yeah, there's definitely some interesting seasons in here. It's no secret that Wilds and Wrecked are not exactly the most well-reviewed seasons of all time, and I'm by no means here to spin a revisionist tale. So I just want to take a look back at the 5 seasons that fit the curse, starting with Vibin. Vibin marked the end of an era for Fortnite, with the chaotic Zero War story arc finally coming to its conclusion with the end of the previous season. Vibin is essentially one final celebration for the first creative director, Donald Mustard. After well over a year of very lore-intensive seasons, Vibin leaned more into a fun summer's evening vibe that made the island feel alive and welcoming. And this is before we even knew that chapters could be annual. So when this season was ongoing, we all thought that Chapter 3 was going to be at least 2 years long. This season had an incredibly fun gameplay loop with the reality saplings you could use to grow items across different matches. Choosing a spot that would hide your sapling well in case you couldn't grab it, but also in the right biome to grab the mythic weapon you wanted, was really fun. This is a season that experimented a lot, and I won't lie, not all of it worked for me. The reality bloom peel-wise come to mind as something that was particularly interesting in concept, but not so great in execution. Still, I think this season gets somewhat of a bad rep, all things considered. It finally broke Chapter 3's insistence of having an insane amount of powerful spray and pray weapons in every season, and it had a really consistent flow of solid content over the summer months. You know, really cool stuff like the Grapple Glove, the Charge SMG, the Dragon Ball event, and Lazy Lagoon appearing. People often parrot that this was a boring summer season, and I don't really agree with that. I think the more relaxed theme just tricked people into thinking that there was less going on than there really was. I mean, come on, this is the season with baller roller coasters, an otherworldly mushroom growth biome that feels ripped straight out of Terraria, and Darth motherfucking Vader pulling up for some reason. Also, I don't care what anyone says, these 2 shotguns rock. Vibin was a vibe. Many people find this season slow and boring, and I used to agree, but I just don't anymore because, well, to put it simply, I grew up, and I started to realize that just because a season doesn't have flashy live events or insane destructive map changes doesn't mean that it's not a good season, and that very much applies to Vibin. Yes, in the years of old I was somewhat of a hater, but I have since rekindled my love for Vibin, and I stand by it. Certified, not cursed. The big issue with Chapter 4's Wilds is that it took an already incredibly cluttered map and just dropped a giant jungle hole into it. This kinda made for 2 experiences playing on the map: the time where you're in the jungle and the game is an awesome tropical shooter with tons of height variation and natural mobility across the landscape with grind vines and bouncy mushrooms and interactable plants, and shrine vaults that you can open. And then there's the rest. Yeah, it's pretty undeniable that the jungle impacted the Chapter 4 map in a pretty negative way. Trying to rotate in and out of the jungle kinda blew, and a lot of mobility features like cars were heavily nerfed as a result of its introduction. The loot pool this season features a lot of interesting newcomers, and the sharptooth shotgun. And ironically, the most beloved is actually my least favorite, and that's because it is sinful filth. I don't like the mammoth pistol. I will never like the mammoth pistol because it babies you and it doesn't require any semblance of skill or even sentience to hit max damage headshots with. Oh, but you have to aim! Of course you have to aim, dipshit. They came free with their fucking gun gameplay. I know that the Mammoth Pistol is not why most people dislike this season, it's just kind of why I dislike it. I won't lie to you and say that I think this is a particularly strong season of the game, but I seriously do not think that it deserves to be consistently rated one of the worst seasons of all time. It's not even the worst season in its own chapter. I think Wilds really just had the misfortune of dropping a giant, somewhat poorly executed biome on top of a litany of bad changes left behind by Mega. Oh, what changes, you ask? Well... yeah, the summer event was pretty bad though. I can't deny that. That was a letdown. Wilds wasn't the greatest season, but I genuinely had a pretty solid time playing, and the jungle wasn't all bad. Shady Stilts really has my heart. Certified? Not cursed.
Give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire.
Okay, yeah, this one's gonna be pretty hard to defend. I've gone on the record to admit that I am one of those sick freaks who actually enjoys Chapter 5's Wrecked in a vacuum, but look, I'm not stupid, okay? I know this season isn't well liked for a lot of completely valid reasons. Personally, I had a lot of fun shaking up the meta for a bit, but this season is stuffed full of a frankly hilarious amount of ridiculously overpowered items. Like, if the roaming death cards weren't enough, there's also the fists that will kill anything you swing in the general direction of, and the nitro stims that send you careening through walls at Mach speed. Balance really went out of the window this season, and for some, that made for a very memorable one-off season, but for others, for most people, they wanted to quit the game, and yeah, I get it. Wrecked wasn't all bad. I really like the wasteland biome and the aesthetic. I really like that they added the reload mode this season. In my opinion, one of the best modes in the whole game. And I think it actually had a very decent spread of content. But it's hard to defend Wrecked because I know that it goes so far against what the vast majority of players want Fortnite to be. And in that sense, even though I personally enjoyed it and I know my friends enjoyed it, it kind of failed as a season. I do think this tweet about Wrecked breaking the Season 3 curse is pretty funny though, all things considered. Certified, cursed. Chapter 6, however, really turns this whole trend on its head, with a lot of people considering Super to be a highlight of 2025's season lineup. For me, and I swear I'm not just being a contrarian here, I thought it was just alright. I think Super was a pretty solid romp overall. You had a fairly memorable Battle Pass lineup with the connecting theme of the Supernova Academy, the Spire boss fights were really cool, and I liked Daigo's overarching influence leading into a pretty nifty small live event at the end. I think a lot of the superpowers could have been more interesting, but some of the things we have here, especially stuff like the Surf Cube, they're really cool items. And they actually did the unthinkable and remembered how to unvault things, which was nice. For me, this season is a little bit forgettable compared to some of the others branded with the curse, but I think that's maybe what it needed. To not do anything crazy, but just to be a solid gameplay experience. And while I have my personal issues, looking at you, Stormbeast, Super does deliver that, and I think it's better off for it. I think this is going to be the most obvious outcome of all of these seasons, but Super is certified not cursed. And that brings us to the latest and perhaps even greatest of them all, Chapter 7's Runners. A brand new map in the middle of the chapter for the first time ever, and frankly a big upgrade over Chapter 7's previous map at that, plus the exciting extraction gameplay with the collectible sprites. Runners is by no means flawless. The Chaos Exploder Rifle is literally King Von, and the little peanut fella looks straight out of Satan's blunt rotation, but the core gameplay is incredibly fast, fun, and reactive. There's a certain chaos brought by the extraction element that still manages to stay balanced in a way that some other seasons, such as Wrecked, faltered. Also, Pomni, you know, the one from the show. I'm sure people will be very normal and responsible about this. Perhaps it's too early to say, but so far, Runners is certified not cursed. Out of the 5 seasons that I have taken a look at, I've deemed 4 of them to not really fit the label of the Season 3 curse. So with all that out in the open, why did Season 3 get this cursed label? Well, I think the back-to-back hits of Wilds and Wrecked, being some of the most lowly regarded seasons in the game's history, really did dampen the perception of this season slot. But even before Wrecked hit, the Season 3 curse was still something that was pretty widely talked about in the community. I also think the fact that it always lies in the middle of the chapter means that it's generally at the point of lowest engagement and relevancy for Fortnite in the year, so people kinda don't really look back on that part of the year with too much fondness. The issue with these newer annual chapters is that they only have a very limited number of seasons on each map, generally 4. So when you use up one of those 4 slots on what might end up being a very basic summer season, on top of the first season of a chapter also generally being pretty basic, you end up with a lot of lost potential. Epic likes to have the summer be a fairly chill, relaxed time, but you can't really do that when you're now over the midway point through your chapter. Perhaps in an effort to fix this, Epic has a tendency to swing the pendulum too far in the other direction, and that's how we get seasons like Wrecked. However, we also get seasons like Runners, where I think that this really worked, where I think the Season 3 actually becomes perhaps one of the most refreshing shakeups in years. But I don't lie when I say that I genuinely enjoyed every season on this list in its own way, some more than others, but there isn't a single Season 3 that I would consider to be a bad season, so I personally disagree with the label of every Season 3 being cursed. In fact, perhaps that very mentality that the season is doomed to fail may cause some to seek out the weaker elements as they jump in and not appreciate the season's strengths. Well, what did you think of the seasons I mentioned? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you wanna fucking gut me? Let me know, because I care about your opinion even if you do call me a bitch for enjoying Wilds. If I had to pick one of these seasons to go back to, which one would I choose? Wrecked, just to watch the world burn.